Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio. Welcome back to Office Hours. It's Friday, and as it's become tradition very quickly, we've established a lot of very good traditions very quickly, and one of them is that Fridays is our Q&A day. So today we're here to answer all your guys' questions. We've kind of packed the entire week this week with a star-studded program of amazing artists and producers and engineers. We had Jimmy Douglas, we had Joe Ciccarelli, Damian Taylor, Daryl Thorpe, Fab DuPont, Trevor Lawrence Jr., Zane Carney. It's been a whirlwind. I've had a blast talking with these guys and geeking out about the new UAD Neve 1084 plugin that dropped on Tuesday. So for today's session, obviously, if you guys have questions, hit us up in the chat with it. But I thought what would be a really fun thing to do is to invite Will Shanks back on our broadcast without interrupting us this time. Thank you, Will.
Yeah.
No, that was fun yesterday. It was really fun having you drop in with our session with Daryl. But Will, for anyone that's not familiar, hopefully you guys already recognize him in prestige from all the stuff that you do over in the UAD forums and online. You've written lots of articles for us, and you've been a part of the plugin making process at UA for how many years now?
Well, let's see. Probably 2004, I started dipping my toe in the water.
Uh huh.
And the very first project I kind of threw my hand in on, I didn't even know what a product manager was at the time, was the EMT 140.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, my
That's a
first
classic.
yeah, my first job was voicing that. Hey, how do I make these impulse responses that I'm listening to? How do I translate that into a plugin? And I
Yeah.
just kind of fell in love with the process. And I started kind of throwing myself into, oh, this GUI should kind of look like maybe EMT's, trade dress.
Uh huh.
And kind of went from there. And then finally one day we hired a product manager. It was very early.
Mm-hmm.
And when that guy left, he said, okay, Will, you're the product manager now. And I've been doing it ever since.
Wow.
It's a really fun job. It's obviously very niche
Mm-hmm.
and kind of a weird job, but it sure is fun. And I'm definitely not bored of it yet.
Right.
Been a
Well, I
long
mean,
time.
yeah, you get to spend your days. It's a lot of AB. It's a lot of back and forth, right? You're basically for people who aren't familiar with some of that, what that process is like. Do you mind just kind of giving a little look inside of like what's the process like for you, and how do we get these UAD plugins to emulate so perfectly what the hardware is doing?
Well, I mean, yeah, that listening phase is actually just one facet of it, but it's obviously one of the most fun phases of development.
Mm-hmm.
And just to focus on sonics, if you got a piece of hardware, it's actually kind of shooting fish in a barrel. You just set that up, have the plugin running side by side, and just A/B back and forth. In its simplest terms, it may differ a little bit depending on the type of plugin,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a compressor, EQ, reverb, modulator type processor. But the general process is the same, where you're just A/Bing back and forth, and really, like in the case of all UA plugins, just pushing it to the extremes so that regardless of where you put any of the knobs, it's going to hold up to what the hardware does.
Yeah.
But whatever, I for drums, that's my main source for just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to reveal the biggest differences between plugin and hardware once you
Nice.
start putting transient rich material through the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's test tones and all kinds of specialized audio sweeps that we run. And, I'm constantly looking at signal view and spectrum view analyzers.
Mm-hmm.
And if we need to, we pull out the big guns and break out the audio precision unit and wheel it into the studio. Yeah.
Jeez. So yeah,
But,
so it's not. So you're saying it's not just look at the schematic and then code it up and then boom, it's done. That's only like the very tiny first step of it, and then there's all of this analysis and listening and back and forth and GUI development. Like there's so many steps in that process.
yeah.
On average, how long would you say it takes for a plugin to go from hey, let's do this plugin to hey, here's the plugin available for sale?
Well, that's a bit of a loaded question because, there's such a backlog of things that we'd like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, the cream starts to bubble up to the top, and then you kind of arrive at a year-long or a 2-year-long schedule.
So you have
Um,
multiple things in various phases of development at any given point in time.
yeah, it's a lot like a commercial restaurant where you got a dozen burners. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on probably 4, 5, 6 projects at a time in various stages of development, from a licensing deal all the way to shipping. You
Yeah.
know, and like now the launch and the post-launch follow-up with the customers. So I mean, there's a lot to it. It's the specking of the thing after you've gotten the licensing deal, looking at schematics if it's an emulation, and the algorithm team takes it offline and turns that schematic into a working model. And then I talk about the golden unit thing. What that really just means, hey, here's the target unit that we're going to fit that circuit model to, and voice it to the specific components in that unit. That's all that means. And hopefully we have an array of units, whether it's a 1084 or a V76 to choose from, that kind of best represents that circuit. And
What about the? I'm sorry, well, I didn't mean to interrupt, but what about things that aren't units? Like I know, Capital Chambers or Ocean Way. Like what about I remember Flip went. Did you have to go down into the into where the spiders were and all of that stuff? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, reverbs are different in general, but sometimes there is a straight circuit emulation involved. But something like Capital Chambers or Ocean Way, I can't reveal a ton of the secret sauce, but essentially, yeah, you're trying to capture that room, including the speaker components, the microphone components, and the electronic path that everything goes through. The secret sauce is sort of the dynamic nature to it, where we're allowing the customer to move those microphones around in the room, whether it's Ocean Way or Capital Chambers. Can't really talk about that too detailed, but it's a different process for sure.
Yeah, there's so many variables there. Like it just seems like so many different permutations, and I just can't even imagine how complex it must be.
Or like an algorithmic reverb, that, like in the case of say like Lexicon 224, you can start with that exact original code, but then there's also the circuit that went around that algorithmic code, that digital component that makes up the entire unit. So each project is different. And that's I said I never get bored. That's precisely why.
Yeah.
It's really exciting to say, hey, I'm going to work on a compressor this quarter. The next quarter we're releasing a reverb. So it's always fun, and each design has its own challenges, and there's usually something unique about it that forces the algorithm team to say, oh, okay, we need to come up with a novel way to address this nonlinearity or this approach to whatever it may be that we need to develop for this particular project.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, and so I would definitely want to, since we've got you here, you've got the most intimate knowledge of what's going on with a lot of these plugins. I want to answer a few user questions that are coming in here on the chat, and then pick your brain about the differences between the 1073 and the 1084, because I know that's going to be one of the most popular ones. But I saw a good question come in over on YouTube here, where Clyde with a Q was asking, you got an Apollo Twin X a few days ago, and it clicks when you make certain changes. You just wanted to make sure that's right. And don't worry, man, that's 100% expected. Do you know what causes those clicks? Like what's going on when users are hearing click on their Twin or their Apollo?
You're actually just hearing relays operating inside the unit. So that can occur for a few reasons, but one of them may be you're using the unison functionality of the let's say the virtual Neve 1084, and you're switching in different resistor networks that are replicating the input impedance of a 1084 or a 1073. So it's perfectly normal to hear clicks.
Yep.
And it just means that your unit is working and it's doing very unique things than just the standard plug-in. Because once you have the 1084 right at the input, it's actually using real physical electronics in conjunction with the modeled electronics to give you an even better result while you're tracking.
Yeah.
So don't worry about the clicks.
And there's actually a document for it. If you Google UAD clicking, the first hit will be a KB article, a knowledge base article that talks about how those clicks are normal and all that. So feel free to do that.
Well,
that exists.
Well, we're talking about knowledge-based stuff here too. I just want to make sure everybody knows. But there should be an email going out a little bit later today. But there is a bug in the 9.12 release that some users are facing. And Drew, do you have the kind of the update on like, hey, what's going on and what's about to happen to fix that?
Yeah, sure. It's a gnarly little thing that's, Apple's kind of locking down their OS a little bit, and all of the developers are kind of fighting to, accommodate these changes that are happening there. And not to get too into the weeds with it, but basically what was happening was that the kext cache was not being refreshed, and every time you did an install and you incremented or did a version change number,
Hmm.
and the kext cache wouldn't get flushed and wouldn't get refreshed, and then when you loaded a plugin, the driver would see a mismatch thing and throw this error. So, and our guys were working real hard with Apple and have come up with a solution to get that happening. So we're going to do a hot fix as soon as we possibly can, hopefully as early as next week. So
Yeah,
we will get a version 9.12.1, and it'll take care of that fix. So
nice.
so if
And
you're
there's
having that issue,
And right now, there's already kind of a workaround. If you're comfortable getting into the terminal, there's
yeah.
steps that you can do before the hotfix comes out. So if you are experiencing weird issues, how can people find that info the easiest?
Yeah, there's if you Google, again, if you Google UAD Mac OS authorization, it'll probably be the first KB hit. I can
Hmm.
even, maybe sometime today I'll find the actual thing and read it off for people. But it
Awesome.
does involve getting into terminal and making a few commands, but it's pretty, pretty doable, and people have had a lot of success with it. So
Nice.
maybe we'll throw that in the chat. Maybe we'll get
Yeah,
Matt to put
if
that
you
in the
find
chat
that
or
link,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So another good question, Shane on Facebook over here is he tried tracking today with Luna for the first time. He said it crashed and reopened completely empty. There's every once in a while this little Luna tip. I've had a couple times where I've opened up a session and it looks like it's open, but the screen will be blank. Occasionally, you can fix that just by clicking on the diamond and basically going in and out of your session once or twice. But also, if you're getting anything weird where the session isn't pulling back up as you expected it, save the session, relaunch Luna, and hopefully it should come back up. The cool thing about the way the Luna files are saved is they're always saving. It's a database system, so every piece of audio that you record, every move that you make for any parameters, those are always constantly saved. So in theory, that file should have everything that you've done. Even if it crashes, it should still be able to preserve all that information and come back up. So yeah, if you're getting any weird bugs where it looks like it should be loaded but it isn't loading, just try going out and back in. And so oftentimes I found that's worked. We also had a great question, another one over here from Alexander. And this one's a good one for you, Will. Is do UAD plugins have a sweet spot where they sound the best, like analog versions do?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask, and yeah, everybody kind of works differently, and there's different workflows,
Hmm.
but any analog circuit kind of has its ideal operating range, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
And because we're really doing an end-to-end model of whatever the target may be, like a 1084, whatever it is he's using,
Hmm.
there is a nominal range in which the device works best, right?
Yeah.
So, just like a gain staging a preamp on a live mixer, you're going to want a gain stage for your microphones in the same way that is appropriate for whatever the target device is. In the digital space, when you're using unison, I guess is probably what he's implying here.
Yeah.
That's not to say you can't abuse it and go beyond the limits,
Right.
the nominal limits of something. But yeah, because it's an end-to-end model and there's non-linearities in the model, yeah,
Hmm.
there's an operating range that is sort of normal, expected, nominal.
Yeah.
But feel free to experiment. You can
Hmm.
do whatever you want with it.
Well, and especially like stuff like the 1084, there's multiple gain stages to play with here. So like, you can if you can really blow it out on the red knob, the line gain or the mic pre, you can blow the crap out of that. You can just go nuts with it, right? And then you have an output fader, which is still an analog model of the output of the channel fader on a Neve console. So you've got one gain stage, two gain stages, and then you have a third one at the bottom of the plugin that's like an output trim, and that one's a clean. You can take off 24 dB, or you can add 12 to it, and that's just clean digital gain. So you can go completely, absolutely nuts with the gain up above if you really want to. And a couple of the sessions this week, we were kind of showing people what that sounds like and how blowing it out of the water, especially like on vocals or guitars or anything that you want to add more like grit and sizzle to. The Neve is a great place to go for that. but then of course usually you want to compensate for adding 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 dB of gain.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of range even within what you're describing. It's a common practice to, let's say, have your gain staging on a snare drum, for example, pretty hot, but not necessarily clipping, but maybe kind of coming in and out of clipping very quickly, like in a transitory way, just to kind of give it a little bit of squash. It's another way you can do it in a subtle way, even though you're right at that near the red line, but not above the red line. It's great for that stuff. I mean, that's one of the best use cases I would say for a Neve is getting it right up to the edge, but not noticeably distorted at the nominal level, but just going right in and out a little bit.
Totally,
that's a fun place to have it.
Yeah. Well, we had a good one came in from Marcel, name I've seen on our chats a lot here. Marcel Zimmer, what's up, man? Is there an advantage to recording with plugins in the unison slot as compared to recording, putting them afterwards as inserts?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, we hang a lot on that. That's one of the big selling points for Apollo is this unison technology. So what does that really mean? It means when you pull up that plugin in that unison slot, that dedicated unison slot, a bunch of things are happening under the hood. The main thing is your microphone is now seeing what you would get with the equivalent analog hardware in terms of total gain, the clip points, equal or lesser noise floor than the target hardware, and everything in between. So it's giving you a really great representation of that hardware in that slot. If you use it on the standard slot, there's some gain compensation for it to kind of automatically give you unity gain when you install it. And again, with Unison, when you drop it in, there's a physical thing that's happening on the input. You're getting this physical resistive network that is replicating the resistive behavior of the target hardware that your microphone is seeing.
Yeah.
So there's actually an electronic interaction that's occurring and changing as you are adjusting through the gain stages of the 1073 or the 1084.
Yeah.
So for example, that there's two if we want to pull it up, you can, but there's basically two halves to the gain range of the microphone input on the 1073 or 1081. And you'll see like it's the white marks when you're on the 1084. So that's good. Yeah. So minus 20 up to 50 is the first stage. Then it goes to an off position. And then when you go past the off position, it's a pretty unique design where it's actually a dual amplifier. And so in the lower part of the range, it's one impedance. When you're in the upper range, it's another impedance. And then on top of it, there's a high-low impedance switch right there, which actually switches between two different impedances. So, in terms of tonality, there's the amplifiers themselves, but also the impedance variation gives you a lot of tonal difference among that range.
I think the one thing that gain staging thing is an important thing to circle back on, because it takes the guesswork out of it, right? If you put it in the regular slot, then you're kind of guessing how much preamp gain. When you have it in the unison slot, there is no guesswork. Exactly. Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, it takes all that guesswork out, and that's especially true for the amp sims, where like a lot of people, when you put the amp sims in the unison slot, they'll notice that there is no input gain at that point. You're just operating the amplifier, and then you could just back off the output.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice. So another good one coming in over here on Facebook from Sam. He was asking about the oxide tape in Luna. So he was unable to find all the controls in the front of the tape recorder image as explained in the plugin docs. So I think what you're experiencing here, Sam, is so the plugin docs are talking about the plugin version of Oxide, which is this guy right here. So with the plugin version, you'll notice it's got a few controls here. You can change the IPS, the EQ, the noise reduction, and then you have an input-output knob. But for the Luna tape extension, you'll notice when you insert Oxide into your tape extension, even when you go into the machine, all you get is an on-off switch. This was on purpose. This was to make Oxide the easiest to use tape extension possible. But the other thing is that you'll notice, and obviously you're probably asking yourself, well, great, I want these controls. Well, you still actually have access to tweaking those controls, but you do it via the presets. So you'll notice the presets here for my tape extension are going to be the same presets that you can find inside the plugin version. So these mirror each other, but they're just kind of more tightly integrated when it comes to the Luna tape extension part of that. And Will, you've had a hand on some of these tape emulations too, right?
Yeah. So the if we want to talk about Oxide, yeah, it's sort of a simplified tape machine, less controls than say the deeper tape machines you find with the Ampex plugin or the Studer plugin.
Mm-hmm.
But in the spirit of simplicity for the extension, we just wanted to keep it as dead simple as possible. So the default settings actually on the Oxide are a great starting point. And if you jump into the individual iterations of Oxide on the channels, you can still drive it with saturation. Yeah, and if you want to tweak it a little bit deeper, you can go right into those presets and pull up something to give it a slight different flavor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you want the presets, each tape machine, there's 4 tape machines, and each tape machine, Oxide is global across all of machines, but you can do a second instance of Oxide in machine B, like Ben's showing you right there. So you could have slot A having one preset, and then slot D having other presets, and pick and choose which tracks get assigned to each of those tape decks.
And that's a great way to set one up as right at the top of the preset list are 2 kind of clean sounding presets. So you can set up one machine to be a little bit on the cleaner side, but then you can make your second machine a more hard driven machine, and then you can pick and choose and kind of season to taste, if you will. Which is a great way of doing it. I got a good question here. Getting so many good questions. Another good one from Clyde. He's in Luna right now, and it won't let him insert a Unison preamp on the strip. It's an audio track. His console is on. It's connected to his Paula. He's wondering what he's doing wrong.
Let's the track.
Step one, record enable your track. But what you also maybe run into, Clyde, is the type of input matters. So right now I've got this channel hooked up with, it's labeled TR8S, which on my IO configuration, this is a microphone input. So that's why I'm seeing the Unison slot. But if I go, say, over to my Minotaur input, that goes away. That's because this is a line level input. So when it's line level, when there isn't a mic pre or a high Z input assigned to it, you'll see it switch over to this look. And this is, you can still add effects. You can still do real-time UAD processing and commit to it. But since it isn't connected to a mic preamp on my interface, it doesn't have the Unison slot. And then, of course, if I move that back to, let's go, my modular rig there in the back, that's on my Twin. So, again, it's pulling this up and presenting me with a Unison capabilities along with all the other controls that come along with being a mic preamp.
Got another one for Will here. If you when you're modeling stuff, Will, do you get access to golden units, and how do you pick and choose the units you're going to use? And and do you get stuff from studios and from engineers? How do you do that part of the process?
Sure. Sometimes we buy units, and almost always we buy a unit whenever possible. But we try to get as many units as we can get our hands on to understand the unit-to-unit variation. So, for example, with the 1084, I think we got 6 original issue units, and we had 2 reissues. So that was nice to have that many to choose from. Unfortunately, with the 1084, they're just so unobtainium that we were unable to buy one.
Mm-hmm.
At least at this time.
So we borrowed a few.
Maybe we could work a deal or something. Yeah, but so and anyway, once we've gone through that array of hardware, we usually just pick one that sort of best represents the circuit overall, and that's the unit that we fit to. So that represents all, the transformer response. It's, it's low frequency rise. It's, linear frequency response. All the amplifiers that are in the thing, pretty much every resistor and capacitors somehow taken into account for the fit. So there's the idealized model when the algorithm designer finishes it. that then gets fit to a very specific unit. That's the usual process if it's an analog emulation. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, and Chris on YouTube he's got a good question. So, is it fair to say that the 1084 is like the 1073 but on steroids?
Yeah, I would say so. In many ways, it does have more features, expanded features on the EQ,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So I guess that's the steroid part.
Right.
But at its core, they're very similar units. So it's the same basic preamp design, and then the filters that are shared between the two units are pretty much the same design.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of like that unit-to-unit variation I was describing.
Yeah.
If I fit our 1073 to one unit, I could completely fit it to yet a different 1073 and get a different sound.
Yeah.
So having a 1084 is kind of like a refit of the 1073, but with the bonus features.
Mm-hmm.
So, the total gain, where it clips, the low frequency rise of the transformer, how much gain each of the EQ amplifiers has, the output amplifier, everything is going to be voiced differently between the 1073 and 1084.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised at how different they sounded myself. I mean, just passing signal through them with nothing, they sound very different from each other.
Yeah, and that's not dissimilar to say like when we did the Fairchild 670 and 660.
Mm-hmm.
When I got the 660, I thought, well, it's not going to be all that different, but it was different, and it was. I mean, I actually kind of prefer the 660. It just has a little bit more punch, and
Mm-hmm.
it's true. There's a lot of unit-to-unit variation. It depends on the manufacturer. Some manufacturers' equipment has tighter tolerances just by design.
Mm-hmm.
Others, it's super wide. Most people, it's kind of in the middle.
And the old stuff, I guess, is just you never know, right?
Well, believe it or not, some of the older stuff is more consistent than you would think.
Really?
If it's in service, probably the most wide range in unit-to-unit variation I've ever seen is probably the Trident console.
Oh yeah.
From
Even
channel
like channel to channel, right?
Yeah. It's like, holy shit, okay, this is really different. And then because it's so different, you can see that the engineers have decided, okay, this is going to be my kick drum channel. This is going to be my vocal. Not that people don't already do that, but it kind of made much more sense with the Trident than it maybe did with other consoles.
Nice. Well, we got a really very specific question here from Victor asking, do UA plugins do oversampling?
Yeah, anytime there's a nonlinear part of the design,
Mm-hmm.
we always oversample. Yeah, and that,
What does that mean, Will? Can you explain to people what that actually means?
well, I can at least explain the benefit. It allows you to overcome aliasing, which is going to kind of exhibit itself in your audio as kind of spurious noise. It's something you can actually see sometimes. They kind of show up as harmonics if you're looking at a spectrum view
Mm-hmm.
of the signal. And, for UA, we made a decision the day we started making plugins that we wanted to use best practice, and we didn't want bad sound in our plugins. And so that's been just a hard, fast rule since day one, is we always oversample our plugins to get rid of any aliasing. I mean, you can't get rid of aliasing entirely, but you can use best practices to minimize it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell, that's something you can tell if you've ever been working at, if you're working at 48K and you look at your DSP meter and you switch to 96, it's not going to double because a lot of those plugins are already internally upsampling and operating at that higher sample rate, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. You're right on the nose there.
Gotcha.
And, probably some people say, well, I don't think I've ever heard aliasing. If you really want to hear what aliasing sounds like in its worst form, listen to a YouTube clip that's been reprocessed and processed again.
Yeah.
That transcoding effect.
Uh-huh.
That sounds like a Halloween toy, right?
Yeah.
So that's the effect. Obviously, it's not going to be that bad. Anybody that designs for pro audio is not going to let it get to that level. But, in certain circumstances, if you have a plugin that's doing things nonlinear, your audio is susceptible to aliasing artifacts.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to be careful with that. Be careful of plugins that don't use anti-aliasing and you're driving it into distortion, making things nonlinear.
Nice. Lafayette had a good question asking if we'll eventually get some basic utility plugins for Luna, like what Logic or Cubase have for like auto pan or clean gain. That's a super wonderful suggestion. What I would recommend is letting us know by hitting the feedback button up here. This goes straight into the Luna developers like Connor and Lev and their team. So by hitting us with some feedback like that you guys are wanting and needing some of those more basic utility plugins like that, jump up here. But in the interim, there's a lot of different ways to accomplish some of the things like what you're talking about there. Of if you want clean gain on every clip, there's clip gain, or for auto panning, there's a great auto panner that I somehow forget that we have this one sometimes, but it's a soft tube plugin for UAD called the Diatronics Cyclosonic Panner, which is one of the wildest auto panner. It's not just a simple auto pan. It can do some crazy stuff that makes your head spin more than you would expect.
And then also don't forget about looking back at early on. I guess what was it in the first week or two, Ben? Tom did a great rundown of all of the free plugins that come with every Apollo, and he literally did. If you go back to that, I can't remember, it was in the first maybe 10 that we did. If you look in the Luna office hours, if you look in that database that our fans have done, that you can find that. And Tom does a great rundown of everything you get free, and there's a lot of like sleepers in there. That precision channel is crazy good.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I full disclosure, I didn't know I had that in my plugin folder,
exactly.
and then he pulled it up. I'm like, oh crap, this has like a lot of really useful, the EQ and compressor on it,
and the reflection engine. The precision reflection engine is super cool too.
Yeah, there's some total sleepers that you guys get for free when you buy an Apollo or a UAD device. So yeah, hopefully maybe someone in the chat can look through the document and find out exactly which episode that was. But Tom kind of took us through all of the free plugins that come included with most Apollos.
Yeah, the Precision Channel Strip, it started life as CS1. It was the very first plugin Universal Audio ever made. And we gave it a reskin, a rebranding, I don't know, a few years ago. And we actually made some sonic improvements and feature improvements. And yeah, there actually are a lot of really great tools just within that. The delay is actually quite nice. It's a modulated delay.
Dude, that one's a good one too. I've been pulling that up more and more since Tom's thing as well. That precision delay mod.
Yep. And the compressor is actually quite cool. It has a unique design from anything we've ever done. It's not necessarily based on hardware, but it's actually quite cool. And we actually added some features to that as well.
Did it originally have the auto makeup gain, Will, or did you add that auto makeup gain? Because that's a kind of a cool and unique feature that not a lot of channel strips have, that auto makeup gain.
Yeah, we actually did add that as part of the refresh for when it went from CS1 to Precision Mix Series.
Cool.
So yeah, the cool thing is, you could use it as a big block, but it's more practical to use it as its individual modules. So there's the EQ compressor, there's the room simulator that you talked about, and the modulated delay. They're all really great, and for me personally, I probably use that modulated delay more than any of those.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot easier on the eyes too than it was when it was CS1.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah.
Well, if you want to talk about easy on the eyes, let me show you probably the most beautiful plugin that's still in our collection. You know exactly where I'm going. Oh, so beautiful.
I'm tiny.
So tiny, so shiny. Well, and actually, Will, you brought up a good point. So in this plugin update, so obviously the headliner, the thing we've been talking about all week is that 1084. But we also did some updates to the GUIs for a few plugins, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've it's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You start painting on one end, and when you're done, you start again. So, we're constantly designing graphics and trying to just eke them out. It kind of goes under the radar, but lately we've been shoving out 3 or 4 plugins per quarter. In fact, I think this most recent quarter, it was a total of 6. So yeah, it's going to be a lot easier on the eyes if you're on a Mac Retina display. And, in general, they're just improved graphics. Sometimes we had, the graphics just kind of sitting in the can waiting to be implemented. And we've been sitting on them until we had support for Retina graphics. So that's why they kind of need to come out a little at a time, because they need to get requalified with the QA team and make sure all the fun little details of the plugin kind of made it over the wall to its Retina ready version. Nice. So yeah, like in the case of the API, that those two just came out, the API 500 series collection. It still got all the great features that it had. There's all kinds of little hidden buttons, like on that 560, Ben, if you start messing with some of the bands. if you decide, oh yeah, that 1K, maybe I should put it back to where I had it. Just click on the 500. Click on the 500 label, and it'll just take you back to zero. And
Ah.
if you want to just zero out the whole thing, click on that zero tab right at the top.
What? So yeah, this is the one thing. Whenever you hang out with Will, you walk away learning like some of these little Easter egg
Hold
controls.
on, what was? I missed that. I was just answering a question. What did you do? What happened?
And why don't you read the manual?
Oh, the heck with that.
It's way more fun to talk to you, Will. So if you've got the 560, you've kind of say you've gone too far and you just need to get back to the jump, hit the zero button.
Oh,
Boom.
wow.
Or the zero label, and it's actually
Yeah.
a button. And Daryl was geeking us out yesterday on the 550. The fact that you can click on the plus minus and step.
That one I knew.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just like you can click on the frequencies. It's kind of one of those things. Like when in doubt, just kind of click on it, and you'll be surprised of sometimes where you can activate things from.
Yeah, usually like on that output control, if you click on the zero to take you right back to Unity.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So yeah, I mean, maybe not every plugin, but everything we've been doing for the last 10 years has an array of little hidden buttons in there that are, just little time savers to get you right where you want to be. And I was bringing up, are you a circular guy or a linear guy? So especially if you're coming from Pro Tools where everything's linear mode,
Yeah.
being able to just click on a label to get you right where you want to go without having to mouse drag around that long road down,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a convenience thing that, hopefully people discover, but it's a little Easter eggy for not reading the manual. So
So read the manual is what you're saying.
Yeah.
it's well written, informative, and read it.
Yeah.
Shout out to Theo.
It really is. Yeah, Theo, man, he crushes it. Juan brought up a good point. So after doing an update, his AU icons have disappeared in Luna. Have you seen that popping up for people, Drew?
Yeah, it's a quirky little thing where people who did the in-app update did not have that happen. People who re-downloaded from the site did have it happen. So the moral of that story is, it's the best place to be updating Luna is right where Ben is showing you, where you're going to do check for updates. So do that in-app update. By the way, in case this is something I saw on week 1. A lot of people were wondering if you do a fresh install of Luna will ask if it can use your screen recording, and you want to click yes, because this is what it's doing. This is what it's using to make these custom icons.
Yeah.
It's using Mac OS screen recording feature. So in case Big Brother is not trying to watch you, we're just trying to take a picture of your screen.
Yeah.
So Ben's going to show you how to make these custom icons right there.
Exactly. Yeah. So you load up any AU plugin and click on the name of it up here, and then do create plugin icon, and it goes from a generic icon to a customized one. And the behind the scenes is it's using it's basically doing a screen capture, saving that PNG file in the workspace, and then making it available for you. So that way all of your plugins can look as beautiful as the
and you
UAD
can find
ones.
them. Yeah, you can find them and edit them. They're stored in the library, and back them up if you wanted to.
Totally. Nice. Really cool. Let's see. Lots of chatting going on. This is really fun. Will Luna be sidechain capable at some point? Hit the feedback button. We're for sure. We're hearing a lot of people. That same thing with control surfaces. There's a whole hardware inserts, MIDI beat clock. Like there's a lot of features that both you guys and us want Luna to have, and the best way for us to gauge what to set our sights on next is sending us feedback, letting us know, hey, I really want, I want these features. Let us know in the chat, but more importantly, hit the feedback button inside the app, so that way we're able to kind of quantify what the demand is for all of these different features. And so, will we get any secrets? No.
Yeah, I mean, if you want, we could focus on 1084 a little bit more.
Yeah. What are some kind of hidden gems that we may not have heard about yet?
Sure. I mean, in terms of just graphics and functionality, it's the same thing where many of the labels are providing just instant value jumps to whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you click on, one of those, it's a button.
Yep.
If you want to cycle among the frequencies, just click on the symbol for the band, and it will actually just cycle through and then wrap around to the other side.
That's cool.
And if you hit shift, you can go in reverse. Like, oh, wait, I like that last frequency. You can do the same thing. On On the red knob, every single one of those labels is actually a value that you can click on and jump straight to.
Mm-hmm. And
Um,
that's also, if you're using this as an insert afterwards, you'll notice, the line gain, you can roll it, from off to -20, but you're like, wait, I wanted, they showed me I can get it. You just got to click to get access to the mic gain while it's in insert mode.
Oh yeah, and that's it. That's one that a new in 9.12 is a new unison mode graphics. I don't know if you're
yeah,
capable of showing
Oh,
that,
what?
Ben. Yeah, there's a new unison mode graphic if you've got an Apollo near you.
yeah. So we
If you
call
can,
it gain stage mode.
yeah,
So
gain stage mode. Yeah,
that allows you to use your Apollo encoder to actually gain stage each of the three stages of this preamp, or two if it may have that on another one. But typically, yeah, these unison preamps have three gain stages, which we can talk a little bit more about. So Ben, if you just pull up the GUI
Yep.
and press and hold your Apollo encoder down, or press and hold your preamp button, preamp select button,
yeah. Depending. There
there
you
you
go.
go.
So that's new to 9.12.
So do that again, and then just use your Apollo encoder to move it.
Oh, that's super cool.
You never knew that?
Someone told me this a while ago, and then I subsequently forgot that it was
Well,
there.
it's funny because it's even new. Like that is new. It used to be an orange dot in the center of the red knob, and now it's the orange ring. But that's only for UA developed plugins that'll have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, there are direct developers are still using the dots. We started adopting these surrounds, I think, with the Korg, and
Mm-hmm.
then I thought it looked really nice, so I started using it. And then in this most recent round, we just updated every single UAD Unison plugin to have surrounds instead of the dots.
That's
a
right.
nice choice, Will. Good choice, Will.
It's tasty.
Yeah, it looks good.
It does. Well, and what's really cool, one of my favorite interviews that we did last year on the UA blog was with Lewis Bell, Post Malone's engineer. And one of the big things about his workflow is he always records with a twin right by, I can't remember if it's right hand or left hand. I think it's his left hand. He keeps a twin right there. And what he's doing is he's doing this. I can't remember which but he's basically writing the gain. He's writing it as he's tracking at all times. So that way it keeps him super engaged with what's going on vocally, but it also allows him to kind of give it a human compression in a way. Like you're kind of, oh, I know he's going to go loud in this next line. Let me just pull it back a little bit. And then we're about to get really quiet. Let me write it up. So it's kind of like doing vocal automation out of the tracking phase.
Yeah, that's super old school.
That's really old school. People, and you can do that. There's no risk in doing that on the fader. I wouldn't suggest doing it from the red knob because it's stepped.
Yep, because
Yeah.
you'll hear the gain difference between each one, right?
You'll hear the gain difference, and even if it was a continuous control, there could be some stepping problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you want to use the second gain stage, so by the way, the first one is amber or orange, second one is amber, and third stage would always be green. So most of these Unison preamps have three gain stages, and that's what the Unison gain stage mode parameter control is all about.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could totally use either the knob or just grab the fader with your mouse and ride the incoming signal and do the
And catch it to tape.
Yeah, exactly. You already got your automation, right? If you know
Exactly.
the performance. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. You got to know the material. You got to know what the performer's going to do next.
Which is like, to me, that was kind of the point that I took away from it too. Is like it's maybe not something I would want to do every time I'm recording vocals, but I do see the benefit of like, man, that forces. There's literally no checking out. There's no like, I'm just gonna let him do this verse while I check my email really quick. Oh yeah, that was a good take. Let's do another one. Like it literally, you have to be 100% absolute focus on what's coming into your coming in the moment, which as a producer you can really appreciate that level of just connection that you're having with the artist.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's nice if you can do it in conjunction with your artist having good mic technique. Like you can have them actually move back when they're going to belt it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's also nice to secondarily have that fader to
up and down a little bit.
Yep.
We got a great question came here from Barry Dixon, sorry. Would there be any reason to do a preamp only version of the 1084? Man, what a good idea, Barry. You know what? Check this out. Neve preamp. So, Will, in theory, this is the same preamp topology as the 1073 to 1084, and it's exactly what he's asking for, of a EQ-less version of that Neve preamp.
I mean, I would say you're probably covered. Like I was talking about unit to unit variation, we could voice yet another 1290A to a slightly different flavor and total gain and clip point and low frequency rise and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I think your bases are covered with this one. This is just nice because it's small and it's uncluttered, but it still gives you an incredible preamp model that is it's still based on that same circuit as 1073 and the 1084. But people are asking for these simplified preamp only designs.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully down the road we'll do it. But I think we're kind of covered for Neve at the moment.
Yeah, we've got a lot of Neves happening, and we've kind of got all the different eras of Neves covered as well, don't we? Like, the 1073, 1084, but then there's also the 88RS, which I honestly, personally, I really love this module, man. Like, it's like a Neve. You get like the best of a little bit of a Neve color and sheen to it, but with like all the controls that you get spoiled with on a SSL console.
Yep. It's actually my favorite gate in this one.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys have used it, and the hysteresis functionality that it has is really cool.
So for people that aren't aware, what is this control? What is that hysteresis control doing?
It kind of sets a threshold at which it's not going to gate. It's kind of like this thing, and the hysteresis can change. It can shift a little bit. I don't know the best way to describe it. Drew,
I have the way I always describe it is it's a differential between thresholds for falling signals versus rising signals. So it keeps chatter to a minimum.
Okay.
So you're basically setting a differential for so that it'll have a different threshold for rising signals versus falling signals.
Gotcha. And then you click on that to just, if you to switch it out of gate mode, you just hit EXP here, and then now it goes from being a gate to being a more gentle expander function, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yep. And if you click on like the LEDs, there's pull functionality in a lot of these knobs. So there's a pad right there. There's a fast mode for the gate over there and on the compressor. So see that? You can kind of see the knob coming at you when you click it. Which just like the hardware, just gives you that functionality. It's kind of buried in the knobs.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. Don't sleep on this one if you guys haven't checked out. Obviously check out the 1084 first, but then as soon as you're done with the 1084, check that out compared to the 88RS. It's two different flavors. Like it's still like a Neve character. It still has like a Neve soul to it, right? But with a very different kind of topology of EQ. And then obviously all the dynamic section of this is really where I love coming to it for. Yeah,
the 88R is still the flagship Neve design, so they still make large format consoles with all these electronics in it. So this is Neve's top of the line still. There's other designs between the 80 series and this, but you kind of got the best of the oldest and then the current with this. And we were talking about it yesterday. I might want to bring it up again, is the modular DSP savings. So with a channel strip like this, if you have the EQ disabled like you do right now, if you have load lock off, you're actually getting DSP savings. If you have a smaller system especially and you're trying to conserve your DSP, you can do that with certain plugins that allow you to kind of squeeze a little bit more DSP out of the plugin itself so that it's not taking up the however many DSPs you have. So DSP low lock is on right now for you.
Yep.
If you turn it off, and you see the UAD meter down there at the bottom, if you take the gate and compressor out, the meter should drop.
I also have a gigantic system.
I was going to say Ben has too many DSPs. That's what I was about to say.
It'll be probably much more there.
There we go. I just bypassed all my 1084s.
Okay, there you go. Well, yeah, like the 1084, that should be pretty dramatic. The preamp is about 10% of the size, and the EQ is the other 90.
Yeah, so you can see here, I'm going from 33, and then I take the EQ out, I'm going up down to 31, and I'm on like almost a 30 DSP system over here.
Okay. So you're spoiled. You're not the average. So
no.
I mean, even most of the time, I'm a bit of a minimalist. I try to get by with 4 DSPs. So I got my Apollo Twin with me. Yeah. And then, every now and then, okay, I'm going to fire up the external box to get a few more DSPs. But in general, yeah.
And so by default, this is turned on, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a you might consider it a little bit of an expert mode. So if you know that, okay, I know I'm never going to turn the gate on for this channel strip, then you could use DSP load lock off. If you want to, if you're thinking, well, maybe I might turn it on, just reserve it and keep DSP load lock on. If you're unsure that you might come back and need to turn some modular component of the 88R or whatever plugin that has this type of savings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's
yeah.
which yeah. So if you're spoiled like me, you can leave it on and kind of leave.
Yeah.
It gives you the DSP headroom that you can always go back and change your mind and start engaging all the different sections. But on a lower DSP system, this is a great way to save some horsepower for other plugins.
Yeah, I mean, remember we looked at Daryl's system and he had DSP load lock off because I had turned him onto that probably like 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you still using it?
Right. Nice. Let's see. So Will, you also, on top of doing all these UAD plugins, you kind of helped us with the tuning of the Neve summing Luna extension as well, right?
That's right. Yeah.
What deep dark hidden secrets are there about? And I'm just joking. So I have just personally, quick question for you. How come when I go between the high impedance and low impedance, there's such a gain difference between those? Because I love the tone of the low impedance, but it's also, I can never tell if it's just, is it the tone that's changing or is it the extra dB or two of gain?
Sure.
Yeah, so what's the thought behind that?
Well, okay, so the Neve summon is based on a 1272, which is, if you're in an 80 series console, it's loaded with 1272s that provide a bunch of different functions, but one of the main functions, or one of the most interesting functions, is the summing. So really, the Neve summing is a 1272 emulation.
Gotcha.
And just like the 1073 and the 1084 actually have a switch for impedance, so do the 1272s. So we just thought, okay, just to be true to the hardware, we should include that. So I mean, we could have gain compensated for it, I suppose. We didn't for any of those three modules I just mentioned. And I think it's just because it's sort of a warts and all thing. We did provide a trim. So if you want to make sure you're gain matching and you're not fooling yourself, all you have to do is go back to the, when you're in the low setting, and let's say you need to bring it back to unity gain, use your trim to bring it back up. And then if you're ready to compare, just use the in-out switch to see where the tonal shifts actually occurred.
I guess, Will, one of the bigger examples of that warts and all thing aren't on the SSL modules, like the frequencies aren't even right, like, and the hardware is actually like that. Isn't that true?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Well, it's like one of those things where like the hardware itself was always, it's labeled the way it was labeled, but right where it says 1K, it's 1K-ish, right?
Exactly. Especially when you're dealing with potentiometers, there's tolerances on those components. Yeah. And you're not going to silk screen to customize each channel. There's no way. Right. So, for example, some of our plugins, you might be pointing your pointer to a label, but it might actually be the frequency that's pointing at that label when it's sitting at that position.
Right.
And that actually, if you look in controls view, it'll actually reflect generally what the real frequency is that that processor is actually kind of pointing to.
Gotcha.
But so there's no hidden buttons on those continuous controls usually. It's usually reserved for things that are fixed, unless it's of course something that a zero return. So if you click on the zeros there, it'll bring you back to flat.
Which you can also do by pressing command. No, wait. Which button?
Nope.
Which modifier is it?
There is a modifier, and I can't remember what it is. It doesn't actually just necessarily bring you back to zero. It brings you back to your last saved setting.
Yep, that's what it is. So yeah, since I opened up the session and it had this loaded as a preset, when I was, so I'll do on this one, it's fresh. If I do command, click on it, I'm like, you would expect, you'd hope it'd go back to zero, but actually what you do is you hit zero, and now if I hit, hit zero to zero it out, that's the Will special right there, but then you hit command, click on that knob, and it allows you to audition back and forth between the setting you had, and then, the new setting. You can do it. It doesn't have to just be zero. You can also do it, just change the gain around, and as soon as you click on it, it's going back and forth to it's the last saved setting. Is that correct?
So yeah, I mean that's something that goes back to the earliest UAD1 implementation. For whatever reason, I mean that was before my time being on the team, that was deemed like more valuable than just return to zero. And so that's just one of those features that's come along for the ride ever since 2001, 2002, whenever it was.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, for me, I always try to add these little value features that, they're a little bit Easter eggy if you're not reading the manual, but they're there
Mm-hmm.
if you poke around. That's the thing is you maybe don't need to, explore the manual, but if you know in your head that, okay, Will's hidden a bunch of things in there. If I poke around, I'll find out what they are and where they are. Like,
Yeah.
for example, on the faders, those, not all of those labels will bring you to a particular value, but zero will. So if you click on zero,
Mm-hmm.
back to unity gain, and I think we did 10,
-10, yeah.
negative
That's my favorite. I always whenever I instantiate that, I'll go 2 clicks on the gain amp and click 10,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
you've
that's
got
kind of cool.
instant gain matched, saturation.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Yeah.
Nice little head start. Well, all right. So coming up here on an hour, we've had lots of incredible questions. You guys are super on top of it here today in the chat. It's been super busy. Will, how long did it take you guys to find the right wood trim for the 1084? How many? Please tell me you guys did a lot of wood samples. Maybe were you matching it with some like carpet or some drapes? Like what was?
Well, actually, so I got a guy that actually builds all these custom cases for me. So I don't know if if you look at the marketing images, those are real. Those are the actual units.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the fader that we've modeled or what have you.
Yeah.
So I've had this guy John Clary do these great custom cases for me, and whether it's the V76 or the Helios or the Neves, we actually make all these cases. But anyway, so the most current one, I was kind of going for the wood trim that came on the 80 series.
Mm-hmm.
It had a little bit of a cherry look to it,
Yeah.
and actually we ended up having a particular look and a grain to it. And then John made the case for it, and we thought, wow, this looks even cooler. We're going to take a photo of it, and the artist actually incorporated it to look like the grain of our unit. So yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
It's,
Authentically modeled wood, right?
Uh-huh.
exactly.
And then I'm guessing it had it's all in the algorithm too. It's probably ingrained fully throughout the code.
Ooh, yeah, ingrained. I love it.
Like that?
Yeah.
Nice. Great. Oh yeah, I'm just trying to here we go. This might be a good one to end on. So how does the EQ stage of the 1084 compare to the EQ of the 1081 that's available?
Well, I would say that the 1084 is sort of right in between. It's kind of in that sweet spot of features between the 1073 and the 1081.
Mm-hmm.
So the 1081 is a slightly later 80 series module where they have that sort of long format slots in the 80 series consoles. Yeah, and they expanded the features. They added another band, mid-frequency band, that's really it. If you don't need the extra mid band, then you're probably okay. The 1081 also had the ability to switch between shelving and peak.
Oh yeah.
On those mid bands. So
well, and also for the top and bottom band, you can switch them into bell instead of shelf.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The top and bottom band.
Yeah.
And then on the 1084, it's different frequency options than you get on the 1081. It's more similar to the 1073 actually.
And also, if I remember correctly, the 1081, this doesn't have the same gain staging sort of modeling as the new ones, correct?
Well, okay, so the older plugin, so there's also the Neve 1073 Legacy.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first Neve plugin we made, and that model's just the EQ filters. So it's just an EQ model, and it's linear. So it's not taking into account an end-to-end model of all the amplifiers and transformers and everything. This is what we could do during the U81 days. It's still a really kick-ass, just standalone EQ, and I actually use that one all the time.
Yeah.
The filters are really well modeled, and it still has some of the nonlinear stuff that you get. I don't know if you call it a nonlinear, but there's a band dependency that occurs on a lot of EQs where they're unbuffered. Mm-hmm. So in the case of all of these models that you see here, they all have that behavior where if you're adjusting the low frequency band, it may affect the high frequency band's shape. But that's that filter because they're using a shared amplifier in an unbuffered way. So all that goes all the way back to the very first designs we made of the Neve here. So the 1081 is in that same boat where it's a linear emulation. It doesn't have the end-to-end treatment. It obviously doesn't have unison. comparing to the 1073 and the 1084. But like I said, as an EQ, it'll give you all the mileage you want to kind of shape whatever it may be you want to dial in, like a kick drum or whatever. So yeah, when you need that extra control,
Mm-hmm.
but you still kind of want a vintage vibe, a Neve vibe, 1081 is still a great choice to pull up.
Yeah, totally. And the DSP wise, it takes a little bit less horsepower to run these ones versus the newer models, which are modeling more in the gain stage area rather than just the filter stage.
Correct. Yeah. Like I was saying, like the 1073, 1084, there's 10 places where this thing can potentially clip. There's that many amplifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And, with the EQ's complexity and all the interaction that it has between those bands, that's why it's such an expensive EQ to model.
Yeah.
And that's why I suggest using the DSP load lock in the case of this one, because you get so much savings if you're only going to use the preamp. And by the way, with the 1073 and 1084, unlike the hardware, you can actually use the cut filters under unison. The real hardware, you wouldn't be, when you bypass the EQ, it also bypasses the filters.
Mm-hmm.
As just a bonus feature, we made it so that you could still use those filters
when it's in the unison slot, right?
When it's in the unison slot and the EQ bypassed, yeah.
Nice. All right, here's an actual better question to end on then. Is there an advantage or disadvantage to placing the 1084 on a bus and tracking, putting multiple tracks together and then running it through a 1084 versus putting a 1084 on every track?
I mean, to me, this is an a la carte per channel workflow.
Mm-hmm.
To me, in the mix phase, yeah. I mean, one of my favorite workflows for a drum bus is into a 1073 into a Fairchild 660.
Yeah.
And you're getting that benefit of pushing multiple sources into the Neve circuit. And, in that case, I'm actually doing EQ as well. Now, obviously, in Luna, you could use Neve summing, and that would have a similar benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need a little bit more control, you could also just throw it through the 1073 and get it that EQ, which is a fantastic way to just treat a drum set as a whole rather than a la carte all the individual channels. So yeah, for tracking, I would still recommend just using individual unison. If you're tracking a stereo source, you can still use these unison preamps. They're going to be perfectly gain matched left and right.
Yep.
Otherwise, you can track dual mono if you need to offset it slightly.
Yep.
But yeah, just use unison, and that way you're going to get the full benefit of what's going on under the hood with the plug-in, working in tandem with the Apollo preamp and all that impedance stuff I was talking about on the front end.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ben. Well, I was just going to say that, like, one of the questions I get a lot in the field is, well, why is Neve summing only on buses and the main out, and why is there not a summing channel per channel? And the answer I always give is these are your channels. Like, the channel strips are the channel emulation, and then when the channel emulation feeds the buses and the main out, that completes sort of the console emulation. So that's kind of like, that's the way I've been sort of guiding users into thinking about it in those terms. This is your channel summing, quote unquote.
And if you wanted to use sort of the cheap EQ less version of that, you just use the Neve preamp. Yep. Because that can work in line or mic, and that can just be your Neve color that you can push into for individual channels in replacement of the full 1073 or 1084.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so cool. you can always throw this on any channel and kind of dial in that saturation to taste. So yeah, if you don't need the EQ to kind of shape it up afterwards, or if you want to shape it with a different EQ, like really popular method is to do this is to go Neve pre, use this for the gain and character, and add that drive and grit to it. But then you can follow that into something like the SSL channel or the Harrison, or just any EQ or compression that you want to put in afterwards.
Yeah, one of my favorites is just run the 1290 as the very first input on your mix. That kind of gives you the sound as if you're pushing through a Neve 80 series. But then, I love the API 560 EQ. So, I mean, I don't use that on every source, but it's a great one to follow with the, after the Neve preamp.
And that's one of those, Will, you put that 560 on there flat, and it's like, it like springs to life, like, is that like, I guess the hardware must, that's the way the hardware behaved, huh?
Yeah. I mean, who knows exactly if, when it's at zero, it's truly zero,
Mm-hmm.
and that's true for the 1084 as well. Like when it's at zero on that high band, it still kind of feels like it's putting a little something on there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's kind of warts and all. That's just what that unit did. That's what
Our
most
model
people do.
does. And
Yeah.
if you guys walk away from the session knowing anything, it's that we care so much about every little detail that goes into what these pieces of hardware are doing, and making sure that the emulations of it match. At subtle settings, at extreme settings, like it doesn't matter. We want to perfectly reflect what the hardware does and what it adds to the sound, so these feel authentically true to what the hardware does.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you know, we talk about an end-to-end emulation, and that includes the ability to put any type of source through it. It's like, okay, well, this thing's
Mm-hmm.
designed for guitar. Well, that shouldn't matter. I should be able to put drums through that emulation, and if I was to put drums through that amplifier, it should hold up and still sound like I crushed drums through a guitar amp.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, it should be signal agnostic. No matter what you put through it, you're going to get what the equivalent hardware will do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of signals, Ben, you want to end this one with a little Easter egg?
Yes.
We have a we'll give a little. This is one of the ones I've been saving. Like I've been for you, Ben. This one's for you.
Yes.
So this one, and this one's Connor showed me this one. Let me just bring up some tracks here. So everybody's probably familiar with the idea of making a selection and doing Shift Option 3 to consolidate. Right, that's consolidate selection.
Mm-hmm.
But if you add Control and do Shift Option Control 3, it'll generate a tone, right? But now it goes further than that, Ben. So if you select 2 tracks and do the same thing, you now have. And if you select 3 tracks and do the same thing, and then finally 4 tracks, and you get 4.
What?
So there's your little tone generating Easter egg there.
Every Friday I walk away knowing something new. This one's not in the manual, is it?
This is
The signal one.
Yeah, the first one, but the rest of this is
Dude,
in there.
But is it always the same gain and always the same frequency?
Yeah, those 4. You have those 4. That's all you get. You get those fixed frequencies and those fixed.
So what are the frequency? What frequencies do you get?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. I never actually did them.
That's not 1K. That sounds like 500.
Yeah.
I don't think that's 1K, is it?
And then, yeah, I mean, it's actually like music. It's like it's a chord. I haven't actually analyzed it, Will. So I probably should have before I did this. I should have.
That's actually pretty cool.
That's really cool. All right, there we go. Now closing out the week with a complete actual Easter egg inside of Luna.
Yeah, that was all for you, Ben.
So that's the normal command is Command Shift 3. That's just to consolidate.
Well, no,
trips.
Shift Option 3 is consolidate selection.
Yep.
Like so that's a standard useful command for taking a bunch of clips, consolidating them. So Shift Option 3.
Yep.
But so you just drop in Control.
Gotcha. Yep.
And that'll do the tone. And then you add the tones by selecting extra tracks.
Smart. There we go. Now I'm gonna have fun this weekend.
I was gonna say I expect a beat. I expect a beat and a composition using that, Ben.
That'll be a challenge. If you guys, anyone that's watching, you're welcome to join on this challenge as well. Let's see who can make the sickest beat using the test tones.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining us, man. It was a real treat having you on here and getting to pick your brain. I mean, you and I do this, when we're in the office and you're showing me the new plugins as they're coming out. But it's really fun to be able to share this with everybody else that's been tuning into all these office hours and give them a little inside look and some inside baseball about what goes into developing these plugins.
Yeah, and online people get to talk to Will online once every 3 months, so and that's all virtually. That's all text only, so it's great for people to meet you and see you and hear your voice and hear you talk about the products and so now when they see you posting on the forums, they'll have a face and a voice to put to that text. So yeah, there you go.
Nice.
Cool, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Will, and thank you everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week. It's gonna be we're not gonna go nuts with tons more UAD. Multiple shows a day. We're back to our normal one a day. But we do have some amazing guests coming on next week. Fab's gonna be back on Tuesday for another installment of our Tales from the Switch. On Wednesday, we have Peter Moshe, the engineer from all the Live at Daryl's House sessions, and we've got some really cool stuff lined up with him for you guys on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we have Walk Off the Earth coming on to talk about how they're using Luna as well. So it's going to be yet another fun-packed week of great office hour shows. So everybody have a great weekend. Go out there, make some music, stay indoors, stay safe, wash your hands, call a friend, talk to your mom. Have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you back here next week.
See
Bye.
ya.